Namaskara, Shubha Sanjay. A warm welcome to everybody present here. Dignitaries on the dais, Her Highness Pramoda Devi Odier, author of this evening, Vikram Sampath, Professor Shekhar, Mysore Literary Forum Charitable Trust, Honorary Secretary Hanuman, our trustees, book club members, Saraswati Samman S.L. Bhairappanavare, and all the other dignitaries and the audience present here. A warm welcome to all of you.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಲೇಖಕರು, ಚಿಂತಕರು, ದೇಶದ ಹಿರಿಯ ಚೇತನ ಪೂಜ್ಯ ಶ್ರೀ ಎಸ್.ಎಲ್. ಭೈರಪ್ಪನವರು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಪುಣ್ಯ. ಅವರ ಅನುಮತಿಯೊಂದಿಗೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ವೇದಿಕೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಗಣ್ಯಾತಿ ಗಣ್ಯರೇ ಮತ್ತು ಸಭಿಕರೇ, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದೆರಡು ಮಾತು ಹೇಳಿ ನಂತರ ನಾನು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತೇನೆ. ಬೆಳಗ್ಗೆ ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಜನನ್ನ ಕರಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿದ್ದಾಗ ಭಾಳ ಮೇಧಾವಿಗಳಿಗೂ ನಾನು ಸಂಪರ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೆ. ಪಾರಾ ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿಯವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಏನು? ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಅಂತೂ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ, ಆದರೆ ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಇಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಸಂಭ್ರಮದಿಂದ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿರಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದರು. ಸರ್, ಏನಿಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಕಾರ್ಯ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವರು ನನಗೆ ಎರಡು ನುಡಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಒಳಿತು ನುಳಿಸುವೆ, ಒಳಿತನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸುವೆ, ಒಳಿತು ನುಳಿಸುವೆ, ಕೆಡಕ ನಳಿಸುವೆ, ಕೆಡಕನ್ನು ಅಳಿಸ್ತೀನಿ, ಸಹಜ ವಿಕಸಿತನಾಗುವೆ. ಇಷ್ಟೇ, ತುಂಬ ಸಿಂಪಲ್. ಇದು ಸರ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಅಂತ. ಏನೇನು ಕೆಡಕಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅಳಿಸೋಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡೋಣ, ಏನೇನು ಒಳಿತಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡೋಣ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿಲಿ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಹಮ್ಮಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಹ್ಯಾಪಿ. ಮೆನಿ ಸಿಗ್ನಿಫಿಕೆಂಟ್, ಮೆನಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಸಿಟಿಸನ್ಸ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ Mysore, even from Bangalore have come. In fact, I am honored to have Para Krishnamurti and others who have come all the way from Bangalore, and there are many who have come from Bangalore, and I am equally honored to acknowledge the presence of Shri S.B. Ravishankar, son of Shri S.L. Bhairappa, who has flown all the way from London, who is a banker. I said this will be a great program, and he is also here. So I take about 8 to 10 minutes because, Bhairappa ji has asked me to read his foreword, but anyway, I will not go into the details of that in detail. A few things which came to my mind to explain to this august audience. Vikram was writing this book, Tipu Sultan. He was deeply involved in that, and he was in a very research mode. And all of a sudden he got an offer, or I think I should say pressure from some source, to write a book on Shiva. So I had to keep this Tipu Sultan aside, started writing book on waiting for Shiva. Nobody realized that many are waiting for Shiva. So ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಅದು ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲರ್ ಆಗೋಯ್ತು ಅಂತಂದರೆ he had to stop, put a pause to Tipu Sultan's writing, and he completed Waiting for Shiva. And within no time, much before the release date was announced, the book at the pre-order level itself, 30,000 copies were sold. So that is the power of the book. I conclude with again what I started with Para Krishnamurti's insight into this. All of us, I thought this, ಏನಪ್ಪ ನಮ್ಮ ಕೆಲಸ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಅವರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ತುಂಬ ತುಂಬ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಆ ಜೊತೆನೇ ಏನು ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಒಳಿತ ನುಳಿಸುವೆ, ಕೆಡಕ ನಳಿಸುವೆ, ಸಹಜ ವಿಕಸಿತನಾಗುವೆ, ಎಟ್ಸೆಟ್ರಾ. ಅಟ್ ದಿ ಎಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೇಸ್, ದೇಶ ಕಾರ್ಯವೇ ಈಶ ಕಾರ್ಯವು ಎನ್ನುತ್ತಾ ಸಾಧನವಾಗುವೆ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಪದ್ಮವಿಭೂಷಣ್ Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, the author of the book, Dr. Vikram Sampath, the organizers of this book launch, Mysore Literary Forum Charitable Trust, the chairperson and the secretary, and the person who is going to be interacting with Dr. Vikram is Preeti Nagraj, and all the people who gathered here for this book launch. I'm very happy to be part of this launch, to be amidst you for this function. It's been more than 2 centuries since his death, and yet the name Tipu Sultan evokes different emotions in different people. His father, Hyder Ali, is the recipient of the benevolence of Maharaja Immadi Krishnaraj Vadya of Mysore. He grew in strength and rank due to his organizational and military skills, and ended up usurping the kingdom of his benefactor and became Sarvadhikari. After his death, his son Tipu continued and declared himself Sultan of Mysore and came to be known as Tipu Sultan. All this happened within a short span of 40 years, from 1761 to 1799. The book titled Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum, authored by Dr. Vikram Sampath, which is released in Mysore today, is an unbiased, factual narration of this period. I heard this from Vikram himself when he visited me in Bangalore and handed me a copy of the book and personally invited me for this event. To me, this 900 plus page book seemed like an encyclopedia. About 5 years of meticulous research has made the book so informative and explores the complex and conflicting personality of Tipu Sultan. Soon after the death of Tipu in May 79, the relentless and tireless efforts of Maharani Lakshamanya Avaru resulted in restoring the Mysore kingdom to the Vadyars. 6-year-old Mummadi Krishnaraj Vadya ascended the throne of Mysore in 1799, and this building was built during his reign and named Jaganmohan Palace. The author, I presume, when he met me, was keen to release the book in this venue due to the historic connections with the family. And another thing, I just asked him informally, how come he chose this topic? And then we interacted about, already somebody mentioned about the television serial being shot in Mysore named Soda Tipu Sultan, based on a novel by Mr. Gidwani. I think that didn't go down very well with the Mysoreans, because it was it hurt all our family members' sentiments, as well as major portion of Mysorean sentiments, and then we On their demand, we wrote to the Ministry of Culture requesting them to stop the serial or at least modify the serial to show accurate version. But however, that didn't happen. But then a few weeks later, I'm sure many of you remember what happened, and the set caught fire, and then most of the crew got injured in that fire. And that actor himself, who was playing the lead role, also got, his face got burnt, and then it was quite a tragic thing. And then I remember all those people being treated at Basappa Memorial Hospital for days on end. And it's just, and I asked him, that was the kind of, he said he was a very young boy of about 12 years. And then from that time, he sort of nurtured this thing about writing a book. He also mentioned that he didn't write the book while his mother was alive, because of the threats he received, and the mother was quite upset about it, and then he had promised her to, not to write about that topic. So coming back to the topic of today, the Jagan Mohan Palace Auditorium, that is this auditorium, has been witness for many historical and significant events prior to India becoming independent and after independence. A few prints of the subject of the book, that is Tipu Sultan himself, and the period, and a hunting howdah used by him is also part of the collections of artifacts housed in our art gallery. I congratulate Dr. Vikram on this occasion and wish him success for more such work of historic and academic importance. Perhaps Dr. Vikram could think of writing a book on Maharani Lakshmani Avaru and her struggles in restoring the kingdom to its legitimate claimants. I recollect having seen a translated, typed draft copy of the treaty which was executed in 1782. I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm immensely happy that this book release happened in the presence of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, who's written a foreword for the book. I thank the organizers for inviting me and Dr. Vikram for inviting me to this event this evening. And I wish them all success, and then for many, many more books from Vikram, as I already mentioned, with historic importance and academic importance. Thank you all.
And what an august gathering this is for a book of that stature. Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum. What is the feeling when you are in the heartland of where it all happened, somewhere close by? What's your feeling now?
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. Such a great pleasure, such an honor, and I'm feeling deeply emotional. ಇವತ್ತು ಸಂಜೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಮೆಮರೀಸ್ ನನಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಆಫ್ ದ ಪಾಸ್ಟ್. ಐ ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ 16 ವರ್ಷ ಮುಂಚೆ ಇದೇ ಆಡಿಟೋರಿಯಂನಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನ ಫಸ್ಟ್ book, Splendors of Royal Mysore, release ಆಗಿತ್ತು. I never thought that after that, it's almost the circle coming full today, coming back to Mysore, and to have a full house on a weekday. Thank you so much, each one of you who have come here to be a part of my joy this evening. I would deem it my greatest honor and privilege that Rajmata Her Highness Pramoda Devi Vadiyar ji, blessed me by launching this book here. We had a long conversation in the Bangalore Palace, and what probably many people did not know, and she perhaps did not want to say on stage, was that she belongs to the lineage of Maharani Lakshmi Ammanni of the Betta the Kote Arasu Manetana, the same sagacious Rani whose intervention is what got the kingdom back to the Vadiyar rulers after Tipu's death. So thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind presence and benediction. If people across Karnataka have started getting to know me better, if there is one person for whom I owe all of that, it is Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. Avaru nanage acharya tulyaru. As I was growing up, I don't think I've left any novel of his unread. All of us have read, reread Avarana, Parva, so many of his, wonderful novels which strike at the heart of every individual. It was by chance, ಹೋದ ವರ್ಷ ಮೈಸೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸನ್ಮಾನ ಸಮಾರಂಭ ಆಯಿತು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಐ ಹ್ಯಾಡ್ ದಿ ಪ್ರಿವಿಲೇಜ್ ಆಫ್ ರಿಸೀವಿಂಗ್ ದ ಸಾವರ್ಕರ್ ಸನ್ಮಾನ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಭೈರಪ್ಪ. ಅವಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಾಗ ಕೇಳಿದ್ರು, ನಿಮ್ದು ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳು ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಅನುವಾದ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಂತ. It's been 16 years of being an author, historian, and I'm from Bangalore. ಆದ್ರೂ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನನ್ನ ಪುಸ್ತಕ ಯಾವತ್ತೂ ಬಂದೇ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದರದ್ದು ಹಂಬಲ ನನಗೆ ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಇತ್ತು, ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. Within a matter of 1 year, this whole year, thanks to Dr. Bhairappa's intervention and ಅವರು ರಾಮನ ಬಂಟ ಹನುಮ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಶೇಖರ್, he has ensured that every quarter one book comes out in Kannada. The Savarkar first volume got translated to Kannada. Then the brave hearts of ಭಾರತದ ಧೀರ ಚೇತನಗಳು ಅಂತ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಶಿವನಿಗಾಗಿ ಕಾಯುತ್ತಾ, waiting for Shiva, that also got translated. In the last quarter of this year, I think end of this month, second volume of Savarkar also will be translated into Kannada. Idu it's a huge project, so I don't know, 900 pages ಮಾಡೋಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ even the ಅನುವಾದಕಾರರಿಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು, but he is committed even to that we will ensure that this book gets into the language where people of this state can read. And Shubha Ars and the Mysore Literature Festival, as she said, our association goes a long way to the time of 12 years. Little do we know how these connections actually grow in life. I met Preeti also by chance, when she interviewed me for my first book, Splendors of Royal Mysore, and all that caught her eyes, not the fat book, but she actually asked me, why are you wearing this emerald ring? Which was what I was wearing those days. Is it for some good luck? Is it a birthstone? And I think she objectified me quite a bit in that article. So today, little did she or me realize that 17 years later, we'll be sitting for a chit chat like this. So today you asked me what emotions come to my mind. This is the last destination of the multi-city, 7-city book launch for this book. I have, I think, put in a lot of myself into this, and so it is almost like exorcising a ghost for me today. I've lived with this subject, the characters of this book for so long, so today seems like a great culmination, and my heart only and only swells with immense gratitude for all of you, for all the dignitaries, and of course the city I love the most, which is Mysore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for saying everything that is so appropriate about the city, your book, and also
True also, not just appropriate.
Yes, appropriate and true, yes, right. So because it makes all the more sense to hear it from you after this city being the end of your journey as far as the book promotion is concerned. And it's also a point from where a new journey is yet to begin, right? So I was thinking from Splendors of Royal Mysore, this has come a full circle, right? Untold story of the warriors to Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum. You responded as a Kannadiga. And as someone who felt really disturbed and enraged by the national television serial Sword of Tipu Sultan, which showed the Wadiyar dynasty in a deliberate poor light, a lot of us saw it as well. And you chose to respond decades later with a long journey of writing a book, and what a splendid thing it is to do. In that sense, can we say this book was in the making since over 3-4 decades?
Very much. So as Rajmata, Her Highness, mentioned in her speech, that serial, I think, upset a lot of apple cart in large parts of Karnataka. 70-75 years after independence, I think we still owe so much to this family, which has given us so many things on which the foundations of modern Karnataka were built. It is not just economic and industrial, progress, the cultural osmosis, the cosmopolitan nature of this state that we so proudly inherit. A large part, or the major part of that, is thanks to the Wadiyar dynasty, and for which I think they need a louder applause for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how many dynasties of their times would actually pledge the gold and the ornaments and everything in their family to raise seed capital for the Krishnaraj Sagar Dam, of which we South Karnataka people, including us in Bangalore, are beneficiaries of. Kempananja Manni Vanivilasa Sannidhana Avaru, she was the one who seized opportunity and established the Indian Institute of Science, in Bangalore, which catapulted in due course Bangalore's establishment as a knowledge center and the IT revolution gaining ground there later. So for a dynasty like that, the manner in which I'm sure you remember, Immadi Krishnaraja Vadiyar was shown like this, obese man who was dancing with the court dancer, and the Maharani Lakshmi Ammanni was shown like those, typical Ekta Kapoor serial vamps who's constantly conniving and conspiring against
Yeah,
Tipu.
and all this was shot on a Kannada land.
All of it shot
All of
here.
it was shot on a Kannada land at the very place where the Vadiyars
Yes.
had one of their palaces.
Correct. That was a travesty. I don't know what it did to me. I was a boy of 12 or 13 years of age. And very frankly, the confession, as a boy in school, I hated history. I hated this subject because it was such a boring catalog of dates and who succeeded whom, which war was fought in which era, which just made any sense to me then. The maximum punishments I got in school was for history, always found kneeling down outside class. So for someone like that who didn't like the way it was taught, I don't know what that serial did to me. And I said, I need to find out the truth behind that false portrayal, initially of that one king and queen who were shown badly in that serial. And it was a self-funded, self-initiated, self-motivated project in which my entire family also became a part. My poor parents used to come here. Every vacation meant coming to Mysore and meeting members of the royal family, historians, archivists, old-timers, and never with the intention that this will become a book. I think this whole joy of research, the intellectual high it gives, swanta sukhaya, for your own sukha, you are actually getting on this journey. And I don't know, this madness continued for 10 long years, even as I was preparing for my board exams and engineering entrance. I don't know what the Mysore bug that had bit me. My family really didn't have anything to do with Mysore. I'm half a Tamilian and half a Maharashtrian. But I think destiny is written somewhere up there as to what you need to do in life. So after 10 years of, the interest also expanding to the entire dynasty of 600 years, one of the longest reigning royal houses of India, it was quite shocking for me to know that in modern times, there was not a single book that was written about them. Covering 1399 when Yeduraya, formed the kingdom, till 1947 with the last Maharaja Sri Jayachamraj Vadiyar.
You mean to say in English?
In English. Yeah, in Kannada, a lot of that. That also pre-independence, I think Shriman Maharaja Vamshavali, all these books were written. But in a modern time, nobody, for a larger audience outside Karnataka, it was not written. So there's this famous quote of Toni Morrison who says, if there is a book that you want to read which hasn't been written yet, then you must be the first one to write it. So that's how, quite by accident, after so long, of marinating in Mysore and its history, that book came almost by chance. And that's another bane, Preeti, of our historiography in India, which is so very Delhi-centric. We in our school textbooks also, we learn about every little dynasty that ruled Delhi, Tughlaq, Khilji, Lodi, this and that, which I don't know how much contribution they have to this country. But large parts of India, particularly South India, and maybe even the Northeast, these don't even feature in the larger Bharatiya Itihasa, which is a huge, I think, it's a travesty. So after this book, even while I was writing this, my total interest was in those 40 years. The subtitle of the book, the Interregnum, it has nothing to, confuse the readers on the likes of the person who has given the, endorsement on the top, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, to use a word which baffles everyone. Interregnum is actually an interval or an intermission where a regular government is thrown out and a usurpation occurs. So the 40 years is all that father and son, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, ruled here from 1760 to 1799. But these become such an important milestone, not only in Mysore's history, but also Indian history, because 4 Anglo-Mysore wars were fought with the British during that time. And after Tipu's death, the steady collapse of India itself to British imperialism was, heralded. So I was very keen to zero in on that period. And when the book came out, I was a babe in the woods, literally 26, 27, wearing an emerald ring. I was giving a talk at various places. And in Bangalore, in a very prestigious venue, I was talking once on the Interregnum period. And I was just reading letters of Tipu himself, what he's writing to his commanders, go to Calicut. I have converted 4 lakh Kafirs in Calicut. I have broken this and that. He's gloating and telling, and I was just reading out these letters. Now the audience like this, which was very civilized, suddenly one part of them started shouting slogans. There were paper rockets thrown at the podium, maybe testing Tipu's rocket technology also somewhere. And the commotion that ensured, people, the organizers came hurriedly. They were all not as efficient as Shubha to ensure that everything goes on safely, but they aborted the program. I was ushered away to the green room. Now, my poor father was sitting in the first row, and one of them, some Tipu fan club or somebody, they came to him and they thrust a pamphlet in his hand and said, "You have only one son. If you want him to live long, please ask him to mind what he says and speaks and writes." Now, obviously, that would cause a lot of furor back at home. And my bad luck, just 2-3 weeks later, I had written an article for the paper you used to work in, Deccan Herald, on the Divans of Mysore. And it started with Purnaya, the first Divan. And in that, there were some references to Tipu. And that created another commotion. And right in the heart of Bangalore, in front of that newspaper's office, in MG Road, these protesters had gathered. And the harried editor called me and said, "They're asking for your public apology." I said, "Apology over my dead body? I'm not going to give any apology. I have written something that is true. There is a source and citation for everything I say." And the editor was willing to give them double the space to counter me in another article. But obviously, these people who gather in such street protests are not the kinds who will write and read. So they wanted to do something to show that they had achieved their objective. So my effigy was burnt right in the middle of MG Road that evening. And of course, the editor sent me the picture. Those days, I think Orkut was the only social media platform we had. So I made that my Orkut profile picture saying,
I don't know how many people here know of Orkut.
Orkut.
Does anybody? I mean, there's one generation, right? I mean, we know.
Some
Orkut
our generation
existed.
people also here. So, but I could take it lightly because I was young. I was 26, 27, garam khoon, all of that. But my mother, who didn't keep too good health, she really got very upset, and she literally made me promise to her that henceforth you are not going to talk about Tipu Sultan ever in public. And aane madu, nan tale mel madu, you're not going to talk about this ever. And I did it. And honestly, though I wanted to write this, a lot of it was there to come out. I had to honor the promise made to her. We sadly lost her in 2018. And I thought, once the promise made to a person, the person himself or herself is not there, even the promise is vacuous. So I broke the promise and actually wrote this book with the hope that from whichever heaven she is in, I'm sure she'll protect and bless from any unintended bigotry or consequence this may come about. And there was so much suppressed emotions for so long, and I would attribute that to the size of this book.
Oh my God, that's a good promise broken, and that's being a good son despite breaking the promise. The size of the book, I thought when I saw that huge book, and usually your books are about 700, 800 pages, is that sort of a revenge on the readers? No. Like read it now types. No, sorry. I mean, to be on the...
I would like to believe that the readability overpowers the size. So.
Yes, it does. I was going to get there because the moment I saw the book, I was like, will I be able to finish reading this? In a few days, not only did I read it, but I want to go for a second and a third reading because there's so many details and not one line is going to hold you to an unaccountable citation, or there's not one sweeping statement made without a good adhara is what we call in Kannada. I feel adhara in Kannada is a better word than citation. Adhara is actually on which your argument rests. So my next question would be, we have had a very cleansed image of Tipu, right? I mean, Mysore Huli, and I have all bravado and all right things said about him and made him a freedom fighter. Why did the early historians choose to cleanse Tipu particularly and not the Adil Shahis, because we've had a history of Muslim rulers elsewhere in Karnataka, like the Nizams or the Adil Shahis in South. And in the foreword, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa provides a glimpse from which Dr. Shekhar read, provides a glimpse of why it was done so in the early days. But would you like to deliberate on your reasons behind this glorification or the other side of it?
Quite nicely, you've addressed the elephant in the room in the very first question. So that's quite a googly ball you're giving me. Well, as Dr. Bhairappa has written in the foreword and Professor Shekhar read that portion out, I think, Preeti, somewhere after independence, I do understand the predicament of the founding, fathers and mothers of this republic. We were born of a bloody partition, a partition that was on communal lines. So maybe immediately after that, let's not talk about old wounds. I think even in families, if there is a traumatic experience in front of children, you don't talk. But as a child grows, you can't hide the truth from people. You have to tell it out. If you have to heal that wound also and move on in life. I think the biggest problem in Indian historiography has been to labor under a very false misapprehension that talking about inconvenient truths of the past will somehow upset today's social cohesion and amity. I mean, by doing that, somehow you yourself are hyphenating communities of today with people of the past. I mean, I repeat this time and time and time again. The Muslims of India are not responsible for the atrocities committed by Ghazni, Ghori, Timur, Tipu, Aurangzeb, all these barbaric rulers. The converse is also true, that communities today should not valorize and hyphenate themselves with them. As long as you have that, then the coming together cannot happen. When imagine if I am actually valorizing somebody who has committed the worst of atrocities on your grandfather, and still you and I, how do we become friends? So I think this is a two-way traffic, which somehow, as Bhairappaji has paid a price for that, for the stands he has taken very, very truthfully of fearlessly talking the truth. So sanitization of a lot of these crimes. Mr. Arun Shauri had his book Eminent Historians, where he has documented, the West Bengal government in 1989. There is a circular that the Marxist government of Jyoti Basu actually brings out, where they survey all the textbooks of history of various classes. And there are two columns. One is called Ashuddho and the other is Shuddho. In the Ashuddho, you have all the details, Muhammad Ghazni destroyed Somnath, Aurangzeb did this, Tipu Sultan. And the Shuddho, the directives given by this committee to the historians is, don't talk about this, tone this down. This is going to cause, unrest. But why should that be? I mean, very openly, we talk about British atrocities in India. We talk about Churchill being the horrendous man who caused the Bengal famine, which killed millions of people. That time, we don't think the Christians of India are going to get affected or they will feel bad about it. We openly, British are the bad guy all the time, and maybe rightly so. But then the religious connotation doesn't come. But when it comes to these characters, I don't know why we immediately feel someone today will get offended. So by doing that, I think we ourselves are giving them a message that these people are your role models and heroes, and that is why we are sanitizing them and presenting them to you in a very squeaky clean manner. Now, Tipu is a historian's enigma. There's a good side, there's a bad side. Glossing over one for the other, I don't think that is correct history anyway. But I think for the longest time, we have whitewashed these crimes. And in his case, as you mentioned, this whole idea that he was a freedom fighter, no doubt at all that he was a very, very brave soldier, and all his life he fought. He had immense hatred for the British. He, till his last breath, he died fighting against the British. And Mysore, as I mentioned, was one of the last bastions of anti-colonial resistance against the British Empire. All that is undoubtable. Anyone who says something else, I think they are also being, totally untrue with the past. But to call him a freedom fighter, when, as was mentioned, I think earlier, that he was taking the help of the French to fight the British. And the French were no less colonial than the British. By some strange fate of luck, if Tipu had won, Today, I think you and I would be having this conversation in French and not in English, because Mysore and maybe the rest of India would have become a French colony. And he was, so on the one hand, to the French, he was appealing to them about their rivalry against the British. And just as he was fighting the Marathas, the Nizam, and other players in the subcontinent, the British were just yet another player he was fighting against. He was fighting for his own life, his honor, his kingdom. The idea that he was a liberator of India, I think that is a little too far-fetched. And this comes from the same Marxist school which says there was no concept of India itself before the British Empire. They united us into a political entity called India and all of that. And nationalism is a bad word. The same group says he was a nationalist who was a freedom fighter. If there was no India, what India was he fighting for? So these logical loopholes come repeatedly when we characterize Tipu by this. And he also wrote to other co-religionists. He appealed to the religious sentiments of the larger Muslim Brotherhood, the Ummah, where he wrote to Zaman Shah, the Afghanistan ruler, the Durrani ruler, where clearly the prescription is there that come and invade India, and I will help you in this. And the plan is for 2 years. In the first year, we will cleanse the whole of North India from the Kafirs. Repeatedly, the stress is on Kafirs and non-believers. Second year, we will cleanse the south of India from the Kafirs, and then we will both unite and divide this whole subcontinent among ourselves as an Islamic caliphate. So as I said, if by chance Tipu had won, we would have either been an Islamic caliphate or we would have been a French colony. So much for freedom fighting. And so I think while, as I said, I don't discount the bravery, I don't discount his anti-British stance throughout his life till the last breath of his life, let us not stretch the truth so much to retrofit it by definitions and yardsticks of today.
Are you saying he fought the British because British were a common enemy? And also because anybody that attacked the territory or the land that that a particular ruler held administration in would be seen as an enemy attacking the land. So by that logic, I think has he fought the British?
So yes, I mean, his father Hyder, in several of the wars, there were also alliances with the British. At the end of the first Anglo-Mysore war, he actually goes to the extent that I shall, hand over all the ports on the coastal side, Honavar, Mangalore, to the British. They were happy to do trade negotiations with them. But the British repeatedly also, betraying the treaties that were signed with Hyder, I think that also brought a certain amount of hatred and non-dependability and the trust factor of the British in Tipu's mind. But come to think of it, I mean, there were 4 wars that were fought. If someone has to be eulogized for the bravery, actually Hyder won the first 2 Anglo-Mysore wars decisively. In the first Anglo-Mysore war, he goes to the very gates of Madras, which was the seat of the British power, Fort St. George, and the British are forced to sign a very, very humiliating treaty. And the shockwaves of that go all the way to London. It is discussed in the British Parliament. The stock price of the East India Company falls, and the board of directors are asking the Governor General in Madras, who the hell is this man who is causing us this kind of suffering? And the second Anglo-Mysore war too, where Tipu too had a very important role, but under the leadership of the father. So where there was a battle of Polilur, where someone like Colonel Bailey beaten black and blue. The Mysore rockets, which both father and son improvised on and made it very, very, far-reaching and so on, it caused a huge destruction in Bailey's, army. Sir Hector Munro, who was the hero of the Battle of Plassey, the Battle of Buxar, who had defeated so many kings, the Shah Alam, and then the Nawab of Awadh and Bengal, he literally throws away all his arms and ammunition in a tank in Kanchipuram and runs away to Madras to save his life. So that was the terror that these 2 people managed to invoke in the British. But after the father's death, the 2 wars that Tipu fought independently, he lost miserably in both of them. So in the third Anglo-Mysore war, he lost half his kingdom and the war indemnity of about 3.5 crores. The state budget then was only 2 crores. I think today you won't even get a 2 BHK apartment in Bangalore for that price, but that was the state budget. And to give that indemnity, he also had to give away his sons, Abdul Khalik and Muizuddin, as hostages. And of course, in the last Anglo-Mysore war, at the fort of Srirangapatna, where he was encircled on 4th May 1799, he was defeated and killed in battle. Now, many people who say, did the British villainize Tipu and that is why you see a very bigoted image of him? Why would they want to villainize him? Whereas actually, if someone defeated them really badly, it was Hyder Ali. But for Hyder, there is only praise in British accounts. I have quoted so many such people, including Wilkes and, Bowring also says, much later, the commissioner of Mysore, who says, though he was very, very cruel and so on, there was a certain amount of respect for Hyder in the people of Mysore. But the same cannot be said about Tipu. So this argument that it is the British who distort this image of Tipu, why would you want to distort an image and whom do you have to convince that because he was a despot, that is why we went and killed him? The victor doesn't have to give, convincing arguments or reasons to anybody. So this whole argument collapses that this is all a fabrication. There cannot be, smoke without fire. I'm sure all historical accounts have exaggeration. So even when we come to the cruelties that Tipu Sultan inflicted, there will be exaggeration on all sides. But to say none of that happened, I think that is the whitewashing and the sanitizing of the image of this man, which you asked earlier.
Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of a contrast between the father and the son. Father, in your book, you say that he was hardly educated, but Tipu knew so many languages he could speak, but Hyder could also speak languages, but I think he could only sign his name, right?
First alphabet.
First alphabet of his name, yeah. And then Tipu was initiated into education and warfare, everything. What do you think kind of becomes of Tipu when he becomes an administrator? And in your own book, suddenly when you start thinking that you're going to explain more and more about how cruel Tipu was, you talk about Hyder and say he was a much better administrator than his son, and he was more human than his son.
Relatively, you can't in absolute terms think so, but I think so. Almost 1/3 of the book, which is about 1 lakh words, is on Hyder, and actually that should have been a separate volume in itself, because I think you cannot understand Tipu Sultan unless you contrast him to his father and see the foil that is there between the two. Now, the manner in which he enters Mysore's politics is very, very pitiable. He is a boy of 4 years of age when his father dies in a battle, Fateh Muhammad. And he owed some money to somebody, and to get that money back, Abdul Khalik, he comes and Abdul Kuli Khan, he comes and puts these 2 boys, 4-year-old Hyder and 8-year-old Shahbaz, into a big nagada. And, they plunder the house and they are locked inside this nagada, and the nagada is beaten upon and they almost faint. They want the money back. And at that pitiable condition, his mother, Majida Begum, she runs away to Srirangapatna and she pleads before the Maharaja, Dodda Krishna Raja Vadiyar, and says, my poor fatherless sons, can you please help them? And in such a pitiable time, it is the Maharaja who takes pity on these boys, pays away the debtors, and also promises that once they come of age, they will be enlisted into the Mysore army. Little did he know what he was getting into. And he keeps his word also, because when Hyder comes of age, in 1749, in the siege of Devanahalli, he makes his first appearance under the leadership of Karachuri Nanjarajaya, who was the Dadavai. 1749, in a matter of just 12 years, the manner of machinations, running with the hare, hunting with the hounds that this man does, he would put all our modern politicians to shame. The kind of very, very cunning alliances he makes. And slowly, everybody was lost in that time in India, which was so politically full of flux. You had the Carnatic wars, the war of succession in Arcot, in Hyderabad. There was only one person who won this whole and square, it was Hyder Ali. In 12 years, he manages to overthrow the very person who was his benefactor and take over his throne. And I think that thing remained in his mind all through, that, it's a Hindu majority kingdom and there's a Hindu Maharaja who took pity on me and I have literally overthrown him and become a Sarvadhikari. So that's why he never, openly exhibited any kingly powers. So the Wadiyar was kept as a puppet on the throne. All the trophies of war would be submitted to his feet. Farmans would go out in his name, but everybody knew where the true power was. And the minute the Maharaja would come of age, you had better the Chamraj Wadiyar, you had so many others. All of these people, the minute they came of age, mysteriously a glass of milk would go to their chambers, and the next morning they would be found dead because he would have poisoned them to death. And then you'll put a infant again on the throne, Khasa Chamraj Wadiyar later who comes. The minute they start assuming a mind of their own, they are cold blood eliminated. But for him, matters of religion did not matter much. For him, the ends mattered. As long as he had the power, it didn't matter who followed what religion. He was such a shrewd, cunning, and very, very vindictive, only bothering about the end. And the biggest travesty is he passes on this kingdom to his son, who is much better educated than him. Goes to show education does not necessarily translate into tact and diplomacy. A kingdom which is given to you on a platter, this son, because of his own hubris, his arrogance, his megalomania, I think his extremely bloated self-image that I can do no wrong, does a series of mistakes, one after the other, and almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. His downfall is scripted almost from the very first day, and finally he's found dead amidst a heap of dead bodies in Srirangapatna. So I think this contrast between these two, and it's very interesting to see the religious policy of these two people, because Hyder, because he was not so learned, he appoints some Maulvi to teach his young sons, both Tipu and Karim, the second boy. And 2-3 years later, he does a mock examination to see what have they learned, my sons. And it said that he is aghast by what the sons talk there. And he says, he dismisses that Maulvi, he loses his temper. And he says if they, read this kind of religious bigotry, they will grow up to become a very good mullah, but he will not become a good, king. And he will lose all that I have built with so much of cunningness and avarice and politics. And it was a perverse truth that came later. And so when we see the father-son dynamic also, I don't think he loved him a lot, but he didn't think too high many times of his acumen when it came to various, statecraft or warfare. In the midst of this battle of Chinkurali, which was fought, I think, just here near Melkote, the Moti Talab that is there, with the Marathas. At that time, in the middle of the war, Tipu does something intemperate. So Hyder takes a cane from someone there and beats him so hard in front of everyone. And Tipu that time is a 21-year-old boy. He's not a small kid. And he's so upset, obviously, your father beating you in front of everybody. So he throws away his turban, he dashes his sword and says, to hell with you and your war, I'm not going to fight with you. And after that, the father actually makes the son sign an agreement, which has about 8 articles. This agreement was found in the palace in Srirangapatna after his death, Tipu's death. Tipu is signing an agreement to the father saying, I will not steal anything. If I steal, I can be flogged. I will not do idle talk with anybody. If I do, I can be given this punishment. I will not cause insurrection against the Sarkar. I will not be found doing conspiracies against the Sarkar. And if I do that, I can be hanged. So sign also, I have signed all this in my full senses, and he puts his sign and seal there, which shows that from petty crimes to also conspiracy against the kingdom, the father thought his son was capable of doing all that and extracted a promise from him not to do this. So, the foil that Hyder presents to Tipu, I think you have to see that to be able to understand why this man grew to become what he became.
So, while he signs that he will not go against the Sarkar, and then he becomes Sarkar-e-Khudadad, right? I mean, he becomes the Sarkar himself so that he does no wrong technically.
Yeah, for him, he said, why should I pander to the Wadiyar? I
Yeah.
mean, there is no use.
Yeah.
So he puts them all in house arrest. Maharani Lakshmi Ammani also in the Natakashale. That is the only place that she could be part of. And from there, the establishment of an Islamic kingdom. The Mysore itself becomes Sarkar-e-Khudadad, or the God-given kingdom. Persian replaces Kannada and Marathi in court documents, and Dr. Bhairappa has mentioned in the foreword how even today in the revenue department in Karnataka, a lot of these Persian terms that have come to vogue, these all go back to Tipu's legacy. And places, their names changing, Mysore becoming Nazarabad, Mangalore is Islamabad, Calicut is Farrukhabad, Coorg is Zafrabad, all these Islamic names to that, coins with Persian numerals to a Kannada speaking population. And all of Mysore almost getting, broken down. That is megalomania, where, the finest irrigation works, the finest palaces that the Vodayars had built, you destroy that, and in its place you build another one, so as to stamp your own authority. So I think constantly that inferiority complex was there, that I am a usurper, I am not a legitimate ruler. And for that he also sends letters to the Mughal emperor saying, you certify me as the true ruler, the true Badshah. Because Hyder may have taken it as a Kararnama between Wadayar and him, but that was not a hereditary transfer to his son. So he needed legitimacy from the Mughal. Now the Mughal could not give this, so he sends emissaries all the way to the Caliph. So an Islamic Caliph sitting in Constantinople has to give credit or accreditation to a ruler in South India, in Mysore, to rule. And this was a practice which normally the Khiljis and Tughlaqs and Lodhis followed. It was only the Mughals who said, we don't depend on the Caliph for our rule. But Tipu Sultan brings that out. And so after he actually gets the Caliph's permission to, and in 1789, when he gets this farman from the Caliph that I declare you as the ruler, who is he to declare somebody in Mysore as the ruler? But he declares it, and then he, Badshah, Sultan of Mysore, and that huge throne that he starts building for himself. Unfortunately, he never gets a chance to sit on it, because by the time it is completed, he is actually killed. So you see this person who, I think that megalomania which I mentioned, it makes him try to leave his imprint on every aspect of governance, coins, irrigation, even calendar, the calendar system. He dispenses both the Hindu Panchanga and also the Muslim lunar calendar, and starts his own Maududi calendar. And because of that, there is so much of discrepancy about when he was born. Some people say 10th of November, 1750, some say 20th November 1750, some say it is 1st of December 1751, because there were so many dates and some discrepancies in calculations that were there. So that is the picture that emerges of this man, which is a very sad picture actually, of a man literally digging his own grave step by step.
While you say all that, you also talk about the other aspects of his administration, and also networking ability with the Islamic rulers across continents. I mean, I have a very strong recall on how the Osmanian, the Ottoman Turks ruled, and most of his interests, focus, style of administration, even punishment, right? I mean, we have a Tipu drop. There's hardly, now it's a tourist spot, but my God, it's rather gory to have a point from where people were killed as a tourist attraction, something like that. So even the style of punishment, I'm thinking, draws a very strong parallel with the Shahs and the Ottoman Turks and the Afghan rulers and all that. So was he influenced through this route and through this interaction with them, and that was happening worldwide at that point?
Could be, very much possible, because he was sending these embassies to Turkey, to Persia, to all these places. And at that time you had the Wahhabi ideology that was coming up there, one of, purest form of Islam, some of the most, violent and also theological in its nature. And I think at this point, history, Preeti, also offers us a space where we can heal from the wounds of the past. And at this point, it's a somber moment. Gory details nonetheless, but I think we must recount, the kind of tortures that various communities faced at the hands of this man. And somewhere, that's the only tribute we can probably pay to those souls who have just been wiped off, and no recall of their lives or their sufferings. Within Mysore, of course, you had the Mandyam Iyengars, who of the Bharadwaj Gotra, and 700 people, men, women and children of that family, brutally put to death on Naraka Chaturdashi just before Deepavali. And as you know, that community doesn't celebrate Diwali on that day, while the rest of us actually do. So it is not a historical injustice done, 200 years ago. There is still living memory of that in these people.
So is with the Malabar.
Yes, yes.
The
And
coastal Karnataka.
why did he do this to the Mandya Mayangars? Because there were two pradhans, the Mysore pradhans, Tirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, who were carrying the messages of Rani Lakshmi Ammanni to the British in Madras. Now this Rani, she was hardly allowed to go out anywhere. The only daily, visit was to the Kille Venkatramana temple, and in that she would hide these letters in the puja, saman, and pass it on to the pujari, and with a sleight of hand and probably a eye gesture, that letter would then go through the pradhans to Madras. Now he tried his best to catch these two Mysore pradhans, but somehow they managed to give him a slip and run here and there. Now because you could not catch them, the brunt of that is borne by his entire community, who had nothing to do with this sabotage. Okay, he thought they were traitors, they were trying to, overthrow him. He is legitimately allowed to do whatever he wants with them. But why should that punishment fall on the entire community of the poor Mandya Mayangars? Children who were also killed in this, and Lakshmi Ammanni writes in her letters to the British that, this is Narayan Rao and Tirumal Rao. 700 members of their family have paid their price with their life for our sake, and so on. And she used to sign off with Sri Ranga as her nom de plume. So this was one brutal tale. The other is, of course, the Mangalore Christians. Heart goes out when you actually read those accounts. Upwards of 60,000 to 80,000 Christians, Canara Christians in North and South Canada, brutally dragged all the way from Mangalore to Srirangapatna, about 300 kilometers. Pregnant women being made to march, most of them, delivering babies on the way, these children, babies dying or the mothers dying, people not even able to do funeral for their dead ones, and they would throw off the bodies in this lakes. You had the Netrekere there, which is actually the Netrekere, the river of blood that flowed in and around Mangalore. And once they came to Mysore, they were put in these dungeons, and unless they converted, their lips and noses would be cut off. They would be paraded on, donkeys and all of that. And those Canara Christians who converted, they were made into a separate army called the Ahmadi army. Now, why did these Christians face the brunt? Only because during the Second Anglo-Mysore War, when the British attacked, some of the Portuguese clergy, which was there in Mangalore, they collaborated with the British army, the General Matthews who came and so on. When they heard that Tipu was coming to attack, the Portuguese somehow managed to sit in their ships and go away to Goa. Now again, the burden of that falls on the poor 60,000 Christians, 80,000, who didn't have anything to do with this thing. And that too, the day chosen was Ash Wednesday, just before that, 6 weeks of Lent before Easter. On that day, you catch them and inflict these tortures. Names, just like the Nazi, this one, where you draw up names of all the Jews and then targeted cruelty to all of them. Lists were drawn of all these Christians, and the account of that is there in the Mangalore Archdiocese, the Barkur manuscript in Kannada. There are so many others who have written about this. So this was one gruesome part. Then of course the Kodavas who always tried to hit back against him, and every year on 12th of December, the Kodavas commemorate it as the day of a martyr's day. Because that was the day when thousands of these Kodavas were called by stealth to this place called Devati Param. He said, we will negotiate peace with you, so come without your arms. And these people, they believed him and they came there, and they were all literally put to death there. And the Kodavas too, the same kind of tortures, dragged from various places. In his letter to Zainul Abidin Shustri, Tipu writes something horrifying and shocking, that he says not only the living prisoners should be converted, even the dead should be converted. Even dead bodies being circumcised and converted to Islam. And you want to find ambiguity. These are his own letters. He's writing it with so much of pride, gloating literally. And in Malabar, you had the 5 Chirakkal, Vadathanad, then Calicut and Palghat and all these places. There, the Nayars, who are the warrior class, and the Thiya community, they kind of push back. And there too, untold atrocities which are documented in detail in this book. There again, Calicut, I think, faced the maximum brunt, and he writes 4 lakh kafirs have been converted to Islam by my order. And this is worn as a medal of honor, not something that you feel bad about. And there also, babies being killed first and dead babies being hung to the necks of the mothers who were then hung, all kinds of, blood-curdling atrocities. So today, as I said, history is, you can't do anything about this. This happened 200 years ago. The victim and the perpetrator are both dead. It's not against anybody today who is alive. All those things apart, to even deny that these things happened is such a huge injustice to all those poor souls who went through this torture. So a moment of silence for all of them, that what all they had to undergo for no fault of theirs, and for the sake of this very, very barbaric rule that was perpetrated on them.
At this point, I just want to recall what Dr. Shashi Tharoor writes in your book, and I like the fact that there is Dr. Bhairappa there, and there's also Shashi Tharoor, and then there is Vikram Sampath, and what a coming together of legends. In his note, Dr. Shashi Tharoor says, though your work on this book is extensive, and I quote, extensive with prodigious scholarship, you're holding an 18th century warrior to the same standards of a 21st century citizen. And would you hold this representative in a secular liberal democracy? How would you like to respond to this?
So this is a very specious argument in my view, that, kingship was intrinsically linked with violence. Now, even we have Ranadhira, Kantira, Vanarasraj Wadiyar and all these others, Chikkadevaraja and others who fought wars. Wars brought cruelty, no doubt. I mean, even today, what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Russia, Ukraine, we common citizens, civil society becomes collateral damage. There is no two ways about that. So even those days, those early Wadiyars, they would cut off the noses and ears and make a mala of all of that and hang it on forts. All that used to happen. But some rulers are more violent than their contemporaries. That is also a fact. And when that violence is driven by bigotry, what is the United Nations Convention on Prevention of Crimes, of a crime of genocide, defines genocide as targeted attack on somebody. Like the Nazis who draw the lists of the Jews and targeted killing of them. Anyone who's targeted for their religion, for their color, for their race or sex or whatever, that is termed as genocide. So you can't say, oh, everybody was very violent, and of course everyone was violent, as they are even now, but some were more violent than the others, and Tipu certainly comes in that category. And why should we deny that? As I said, there is no scope for ambiguity at all here, Preeti. Right. Because the good thing for a historian, for a documenter about Tipu is he wrote profusely. He wrote so much. Everything about his life he documented. And control freak. Yes. Even to those embassies which went to the France, to Louis XVI's court, or to the Middle East, what all they have to do on a day-to-day basis, he was sitting and giving them orders from Srirangapatna, do this, do that, yes. Why are you not giving me details? So control freak who documented every detail of his life. Right. So as I said, his letters are talking this, his commanders are writing about this. The manifesto that he has for his Sarkar-e-Khudadad in 1786, I think, which says that the objective of the Sarkar-e-Khudadad is to annihilate Kafirs. And also that so-called, famous sword of Tipu Sultan, the inscription on it also says that this sword is to establish the true faith, which Haidar had done, and to rid the land of the Kafirs.
And drench this with this blood of Kafirs.
Drench it in the blood of the Kafirs. Yeah. So where is ambiguity? Why do you want to give cover fire to somebody who's himself shouting with pride that I have done this? We are saying, no, I think it is an exaggeration. Yeah. Why would that tendency itself to actually call, where crimes become a virtue, yes, and you need to tell your crimes to call it exaggerated, to call yourself a great ruler, that itself to me is very, very problematic. And to draw a parallel, 1782 to 1799 was Tipu's rule. Just around the same time, you had a Devi Ahilyabai Holkar, who was also a pre-modern ruler in Indore. who establishes a welfare state. Not only, she says, not only the men and women and children, but also animals and birds in the kingdom. They are my children. If I am the ruler, they are all, I'm like the mother for all of them. And for stray dogs and cats and birds, at every street corner, there is water kept for the summer months. Some, seeds kept for the birds to eat. She kind of sets up this whole, weaving community of Maheshwari sarees and all that around Indore. So, contemporary of Tipu, at the same time, you have that example. But you don't have a Ahilyabai Holkar Jayanti, but you have a Tipu Jayanti. And so that is the contradiction. so this argument is very convenient, that, oh, they were all violent. Yeah, even Hyder was violent. When he goes to the Malabar campaign and the Coorg campaign, he says 5 rupees for every Nayar head or Coorgi head that comes. And 3 rupees for every Nayar woman who's brought to his harem. His harem had 4,000 women, across Mysore. And many commentators say he's sitting there ghoulishly counting heads, and distributing 5 rupees to everybody who brought one head. And in Coorg, I think he finds a very pretty boy whose head comes there, and he looks at it and he says, such a handsome face, so let us stop the beheading. If the face was not handsome, he would have continued with the beheading. So this cruelty was there even among all the rulers of that time. But here, as I said, it was targeted bigotry. So using Naraka Chaturdashi, using Ash Wednesday to ensure that it is cultural and religious subjugation in addition to just political subjugation. I think that is what makes Tipu Sultan a lot more crueler than several of his contemporaries.
Right. So as we come close to wrapping up this very, very interesting session, though I would have loved to go on for more questions, and we could have invited audience reactions from this. I really want to acknowledge the fact that just as we are going deeper and deeper into the cruelties of Tipu Sultan, you suddenly present some very interesting facts about his life, so as to tilt the total darkening of the picture. I particularly want to go over to chapter 19, where you talk about the other aspects of Tipu. The beauty of this book is, just as you arrive at a definite standpoint saying he was cruel, you talk about his acumen in trade. Despite being in bloody conflicts and wars, you have so many citations on that. You also talk about his interest in silkworm, wanting to promote Mysore silk, and also his and also his expeditions. And you talk about an almost appreciative letter written by William Kirkpatrick in page number 680. As a reader, I am at crossroads.
That is what all of us as human beings are. We are shades of grey. We can't put ourselves in straight black, straight white. Of course, the black here is a little more, but there are other shades of grey too. You don't have to whitewash that. You don't have to whitewash the black too. So his, impetus he gave to Mysore products, setting up a market for them outside. And I think the state capitalism, a very nice blend of totalitarian, where he's controlling the trade instead of giving it out to the, European factories and all of that. And at the same time, he starts a stock market also where people could actually invest and have shares in that. And Mysorean products, all these, sandalwood, ivory, silk, betel nuts, all these things being sold in factories in Jeddah, in Muscat, Oman.
Yes.
Oman. In Oman, he actually has a deal with the imam of the place in Muscat, where Mysorean rice actually is in high demand there. So Mysore gets a very, very good deal. Only 4 rupees duty, whereas all the others, including the Europeans, were getting 8 rupees or 10 rupees. So creating that vast, market for that. The rockets that I spoke of.
Yes,
there is a misnomer that he started some missile technology. There were rockets already in vogue in South India, in the Deccan, which was, right from the Vijayanagar times, the Mughal times, and then the Marathas, even the Vadiyars. When Bajirao the first invades Srirangapatna during, I think, Dodda Krishna Raja's time, he says this is not Srirangapatna, it is Firangi Patna. So that means a lot of these Firangis that were being hurled. What the father and son did was improvise on that technology. What was initially just a paper and wooden casing of that rocket, that was replaced with iron. And iron in India was one of the best in the world. And this new casing could pack the propellant very tightly inside it. And so the thrust of the rocket and also the range to which it could go almost to 1 kilometer, that is what made the Mysore rockets literally a horror for all the opponents, the Marathas or even the British. And they tried to understand the technology and later try to redevelop their rockets based on this. So there are lots of these redeeming features too, which need to be mentioned. The administration itself becoming quite tight.
Robust.
The military and navy
Yes,
strength.
yes.
Mysore would just capitulate to every invader who would come, just pay off all the Marathas and others who would attack. To have a fighting fit army and a navy, and of course, as I said, fight the British. Those were certainly things which were positive about this man. But the ultimate thing is the social report card also. What did you do to your people? And these, as I said, these are not frozen in time 200 years ago. Those intergenerational memories, wounds, and trauma still is there for people today. So if a community is not even able to celebrate a festival because of this wound, or if the Christians in Mangalore are constantly, talking, which is why they also came and protested against the Tipu Jayanti. I mean, I don't think they have anything in common with the BJP and its politics. So this was not a political issue. I think it was the fact that these wounds are there, which is what makes him problematic. But I must mention one interesting thing that came to my mind. A question may come that how is it that if he was so cruel, within Mysore there were so many temples which he left, and there were grants to various temples.
Also
and all
to
that.
Sringeri.
And so on. So I'll very quickly, in the interest of time. So when I went to Melkote, a very senior scholar there told me that, see, Tipu's life was full of so much of uncertainty. Every day there's a war. His sons have been given away as hostages. So this uncertainty and this war-torn thing, it made him rely on a lot of things: superstitions, divination mechanisms, astrology, of which he himself was very proficient.
Interpreted his own dreams,
and dreams are also so violent. Unlike what Mr. Girish Karnad writes, the dreams of Tipu Sultan, the actual dreams are a horror.
He documents 37 dreams as you mentioned in your book.
And the worst part, I believe, he used to have very vivid dreams in his life. And these dreams, I'll just finish this and then. So he used to have these very vivid dreams which he would sit in his toilet every morning and write it down, and in Persian. And I managed to get an original copy of it from the British Library in London. And there also, a bowl of saligrama is given to him, and in that there are also badami, almonds. So the saligrama and almonds he's rotating in that bowl. And then he interprets it that God is asking me to convert the saligram to an almond, which means I have to convert all the Hindus into Islam. So this is the kind of interpretation of his own dreams that he has. But in Mysore, in Melkote, some very senior scholar, he told me that the Brahmins and the Hindus also, you have to survive, you have to use all tricks in the trade. So they told him, see, you are very uncertain about your rule. So your Shasana will continue till ever if you don't destroy 3 types of idols, 3 types of kallu.
Yes.
Yedda kallu, standing stone; Bidda kallu, lying stone; and one Gund kallu, the round stone. Now the Yedda kallu was the Chaluvanarayana Swami in Melkote. The Bidda kallu was, of course, Ranganatha Swami. And the Gund kallu was the Srikanteshwara in Nanjangud. And also they added more elements to that if you ever, if you destroy any Ranganatha temple, then your end is near. Now, when a person is uncertain, whatever, dubte ko tinke ka sahara, anything you say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So any place with Ranganatha, if that is there, his army was told not to attack. So all through South Karnataka, you'll see several places, Biligiri Ranga, Kalyana Ranga, Hema Ranga, all kinds of Ranga added. If you actually go to that Ranga temple, Magadi Ranga near Bangalore, the presiding deity is not at all Ranganatha. He's just put as an appendage. It's a Venkatramana or something else. So Ranga is almost like a scarecrow, to kind of not allow his army to come in. And maybe that is why Maharani Lakshmi Ammani too chose her pen name as Sri Ranga. The minute you see Sri Ranga, oh, I will not touch this letter. So I don't know. It's a very complicated, personality whose psychoanalysis is more important. How his childhood was, what his father did to him. Did that corporal punishment, when you have a very strict father, I think you grow up also to become a very most of the dictators, there was one book which said most dictators had very bad fathers, father wounds, fathers very strict, very punishing in nature. You
Absent
cannot,
and unloving. Absent and unloving.
yes, so you will not brook any dissent, any mistake from anybody. So I would see this character as a fascinating character, a very enigmatic character. And today, after 17 years and another 10 years before of researching this, 27, 28 years, I'm literally feeling like I have exorcised the ghost today and doing it here in Mysore. I think that is what makes it all the more special, because this was his
Wonderful.
kingdom.
Thank you so much, Vikram, for this very, very engaging.
My God, what an evening it was. It was so rapt, and we couldn't, we were waiting, we were hoping that this evening would continue for a much longer time, but of course, all good things have to come to an end. And thank you so much for, both Preeti and Vikram for delivering, first of all, the book and this beautiful conversation with, which most of us, I'm sure all of us enjoyed so much. But the first thanks should first go to the royal family of Mysore. I'm sure all of you will agree that it is because of them that Mysore is today what it is, like a star in today's world. They had set the standards even then, so long back, that it is an envy of most rulers anywhere in the world. They look up to our city for what the Wadiyars did to Mysore. So the representative of the royal family is here, Rajmata Her Highness Pramoda Devi Wadiyar. A big round of applause to her for being who she is. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.